The Galactic Council's emergency session had been called for the third time this cycle, and Ambassador Zeftari of the crystalline hegemony could feel his chitinous plates grinding against each other in barely contained panic. The holographic display at the center of the vast chamber showed a sight that had frozen the blood of every sentient species in known space. The shadow worm of Nethys Prime had awakened. The creature stretched across the view screen like a living nightmare, its obsidian scales reflecting the dying light of 3 suns. Each scale was the size of a battleship, and when it moved, entire continents trembled. The worm's eyes burned with an ancient malevolence that had consumed civilizations before most species had even learned to make fire. Its presence in space created gravitational anomalies that bent light itself, making it appear as if reality was being torn apart around its massive form. The evacuation of the Outer Rim sectors must begin immediately, declared High Chancellor Vex Thule, his tentacles writhing in distress. All species are to retreat to the inner colonies. No exceptions. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled delegates. The shadow worm had not been seen for over 10,000 years. And in that time, it had become the stuff of legends and nightmares. Ancient texts spoke of entire star systems going dark when the creature passed through them. Civilizations that had stood for millennia simply vanishing without a trace. Ambassador Zeftari accessed his neural databank, reviewing the historical records. The last time the worm had awakened, it had taken the combined fleets of 17 different species to drive it back into hibernation, and even then, the cost had been astronomical. Billions had died. Entire worlds had been rendered uninhabitable. The scars from that conflict were still visible in the dead zones that dotted the galaxy's outer regions. What of the human colony on Kepler 442b? Asked Ambassador Schlana of the Aquatic Federation, her gills fluttering nervously. They're directly in the creature's projected path. A hush fell over the chamber. The humans were the newest members of the Galactic Council, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries ago. They were still considered primitive by most standards, despite their surprising adaptability and their disturbing tendency to form emotional bonds with virtually anything that moved. The humans have been contacted, Chancellor Vex Thule replied grimly. Their colony ship, the Harmony, is en route to collect their settlers. They have perhaps 6 solar days before the worm reaches their system. 6 days, whispered Ambassador Korth of the Metallic Union, his copper-colored skin gleaming under the chamber's artificial lights. That creature can devour a planet in hours. What can the humans possibly do against something that our greatest weapons cannot even scratch? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Everyone present knew the answer. The humans would do what they always did when faced with impossible odds. They would try. Anyway, it was both their greatest strength and their most infuriating weakness. On the distant world of Kepler 442b, Sarah Chen was chasing her 3-year-old daughter Emma through the settlement's central park when the evacuation alert echoed across the colony's communication system. The little girl squealed with delight as she ran between the earth trees that had been carefully cultivated to remind the colonists of home. Emma's laughter was infectious, drawing smiles from the other families enjoying the artificial afternoon sunshine. Sarah scooped up her daughter, spinning her around as Emma giggled uncontrollably. "Mama, again? Again?" the child demanded, her dark eyes sparkling with joy. "In a minute?" "Sweetheart," Sarah said, setting Emma down as she noticed the concerned expressions on the faces of nearby adults. The evacuation alert was still echoing, and people were beginning to gather in small groups, their voices hushed and worried. Dr. Marcus Webb, the colony's chief administrator, appeared on the public screens throughout the settlement. His usually calm demeanor was strained, and Sarah could see the weight of terrible news in his eyes. "Citizens of New Eden Colony," Dr. Webb began, his voice carrying across the settlement. "I've just received word from the Galactic Council. A Class X extinction-level threat has been detected in our sector. The colony ship Harmony has been dispatched and will arrive in approximately 5 days. All residents are to begin immediate preparation for emergency evacuation." Emma tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mama, what's vacation?" "Evacuation, honey," Sarah corrected gently, though her heart was racing. She had read the briefings about various galactic threats during her training. Class X meant something that could end entire civilizations. It means we might need to take a trip. Quote, around them, other families were having similar conversations, but with older children who understood the gravity of the situation. Sarah watched as parents struggled to explain concepts like extinction and planetary destruction to young minds that were still learning to tie their shoes. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. The colonists worked around the clock to pack essential supplies and equipment. The more experienced adults tried to maintain normalcy for the children while privately sharing their fears about what was coming. Sarah found herself grateful that Emma was too young to understand the danger they were facing. On the fourth day, the Galactic Council's long-range sensors detected something that sent shockwaves through every civilized world in the galaxy. The Shadow Wyrm had changed course. Instead of following its predicted path toward the galactic core, the ancient creature had turned directly toward Kepler 442b. It was moving with purpose now. No longer the random drift of an awakening predator, but the focused hunt of something that had found prey. Emergency broadcasts flooded every communication channel in Council space. The creature was accelerating, its massive form cutting through space-time itself. What should have been a 6-day journey for the worm was now estimated at less than 36 hours. The Harmony, still 2 days out from Kepler 442b, pushed its engines beyond safe parameters. But even at maximum speed, they would not arrive in time. On New Eden Colony, Dr. Webb made the hardest decision of his life. He activated the settlement's emergency protocols and ordered the colonists to the underground shelters. The structures had been designed to protect against solar storms and meteor impacts, not creatures that could swallow moons whole. But they were all the protection available. Sarah held Emma close as they descended into the shelter beneath the Central Administration Building. The little girl was fascinated by the underground tunnels, treating the entire experience like an exciting adventure. Her innocent joy was a stark contrast to the terror that gripped every adult present. "It's like a camping trip," Emma announced proudly, clutching her stuffed elephant. "We're going to sleep in the underground." "That's right, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, fighting back tears. Through the shelter's reinforced windows, she could see the stars beginning to dim as something vast approached their world. "We're going camping." In the depths of space, the Shadow Wyrm of Nethys Prime continued its relentless approach. Its ancient hunger focused on the small blue-green world that had somehow called to it across the void. Behind its wake, reality itself seemed to bend and twist, as if the universe was recoiling from the creature's presence. The countdown to contact had begun, and there was nowhere left to run. The first signs of the worm's arrival appeared 12 hours before contact. The stars in the Kepler 442 system began to flicker and dance as the creature's massive gravitational field distorted space around it. Aurora-like phenomena painted the sky in impossible colors, and the planet's magnetic field fluctuated wildly, causing communication systems to fail throughout the colony. Deep in the underground shelter, Emma Chen pressed her small face against the reinforced viewing port, her eyes wide with wonder at the light show playing across the sky above. While the other children huddled close to their parents in fear, Emma clapped her hands in delight. "Pretty lights, Mama. Like fireworks." Sarah's heart broke as she watched her daughter's innocent joy. The child had no concept of the approaching terror. To Emma, the writhing auroras and shifting starlight were simply nature's greatest display, more beautiful than anything she had ever seen. Dr. Webb's voice crackled over the shelter's emergency communication system, distorted by the growing electromagnetic interference. "All citizens remain calm. We're detecting massive gravitational anomalies. Contact with the approaching object is imminent." The object. Even now, as death approached their world, the administrators couldn't bring themselves to speak its true name where the children might hear. High above the planet's atmosphere, space itself began to tear. Reality folded like paper as the Shadow Wyrm of Nethys Prime emerged from its faster-than-light transit. The creature's arrival created a localized gravitational storm that sent shockwaves rippling through the planet's crust. The worm was even more massive than the ancient records had indicated. Its serpentine body stretched for thousands of kilometers, each obsidian scale catching and reflecting the light of Kepler 442's star, in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The creature's head was the size of a small moon, with eyes like burning galaxies and fangs that could pierce planetary cores. But it was not the worm's size that made it the most feared entity in known space. It was its intelligence. This was not some mindless beast driven by hunger. The shadow worm was ancient beyond measure, possessing a malevolent wisdom that had watched civilizations rise and fall across countless eons. It killed not from necessity, but from a cosmic contempt for all life that dared to exist in its presence. The creature's massive head turned toward the small planet below, and even through the layers of rock and metal that separated them, every human in the shelter felt the weight of its alien gaze. Emma, however, was entirely unimpressed. "Big snake," she announced cheerfully, bouncing on her toes. "Mama, look! Big space snake!" Several nearby adults turned to stare at the child in disbelief. Through the viewing port, they could see the worm's form blotting out entire sections of the star field. Its presence was so overwhelming that sensitive individuals in the shelter had already fainted from the psychic pressure it exerted simply by existing. But Emma Chen, 3 years old and fearless, saw a snake. A very big snake that looked lonely floating up there all by itself. "Can we say hello to the snake, Mama?" "Sweetheart, we need to stay down here where it's safe," Sarah whispered, though her voice shook with terror. The worm began its descent toward the planet, its massive coils moving with impossible grace through the void. As it approached, the creature's influence grew stronger. Plants throughout the colony began to wither and die. Electronics failed in cascading waves. Even the air itself seemed to grow thick and oppressive. In orbit around nearby planets, emergency monitoring stations tracked the creature's approach with growing horror. The Galactic Council's most sophisticated sensors barely functioned in the worm's presence. But what readings they could obtain painted a picture of destruction beyond imagination. Ambassador Zeftari watched the feeds from his command ship at what was considered a safe distance 3 star systems away. Even from here, the creature's approach was visible as a spreading darkness that consumed light itself. "The humans," he said quietly to his aide. "Are there any survivors?" "The planet still exists," came the reply, though the aide's voice carried no hope. "But all communication has been lost. The worm has entered the planet's atmosphere." The massive creature settled into the upper atmosphere of Kepler 442b, like a storm system wrapping around the entire world. Its scales scraped against mountain peaks, and its breathing created atmospheric disturbances that spawned hurricanes across 3 continents. The very ocean began to boil where the creature's body heat touched the surface. In the shelter, emergency power failed. The adults huddled together in the darkness, many weeping quietly as they waited for the end. Children cried for parents who could offer no comfort, no promise that everything would be all right. But Emma Chen had had enough of sitting still. While her mother's attention was focused on the emergency broadcasts that were barely getting through, the little girl quietly made her way to the shelter's emergency exit. The magnetic locks had failed along with everything else, and the heavy door swung open at her touch. "Big Snake looks sad," she murmured to herself, clutching her stuffed elephant as she walked up the access tunnel toward the surface. Sarah noticed her daughter's absence only moments later. Emma, where are you?" The frantic cry drew the attention of every adult in the shelter. Searchlights illuminated the tunnels as parents and administrators spread out looking for the missing child. Above them, the shadow worm's massive head had descended to just a few hundred meters above the colony's surface buildings. The creature's burning eyes surveyed the settlement with ancient malice, and its breath created cyclones that tore apart anything not secured to deep foundations. Emma emerged from the tunnel into what remained of the colony's central park. The earth trees were gone, turned to ash by the creature's presence, and the artificial sky dome had shattered, letting in the chaos of the real atmosphere. Wind howled around her, and debris flew through the air like bullets. But the little girl was focused on only one thing: the massive head of the shadow worm hanging above her like a dark mountain. "Hello, Big Snake," she called out, her small voice somehow carrying through the storm. "Are you lonely? Do you need a hug?" The worm's galaxy-sized eyes fixed on the tiny figure standing alone in the devastation. For the first time in 10,000 years, the ancient creature paused in its destruction. In all of its eons of existence, across all the worlds it had consumed, and all the civilizations it had destroyed, nothing had ever spoken to it with such simple, genuine kindness. Emma took a step forward, still holding her stuffed elephant. "It's okay, Snake. I'm Emma. What's your name?" The worm lowered its massive head until it was only a few meters above the child. Up close, each of its scales was larger than Emma herself, and the heat radiating from its body should have incinerated anything living. But somehow, the little girl remained unharmed. "You're very pretty," Emma said matter-of-factly. "I like your sparkly scales. Are you magic?" For long moments, predator and child regarded each other in silence. The storm winds died to a whisper. The very air seemed to hold its breath. Then, impossibly, the shadow worm of Nethys Prime, the terror of 1,000 worlds, the destroyer of civilizations, lowered its massive head toward the tiny human child. And Emma Chen, without a moment's hesitation, reached up and gave it the gentlest kiss on its obsidian snout. The moment Emma's lips touched the worm's scales, something extraordinary happened. A ripple of energy spread outward from the point of contact, washing over the creature's massive form like a wave of pure light. The malevolent fire in the worm's eyes flickered and dimmed, replaced by something that had not existed there for millennia. Confusion. The ancient creature had felt many things in its endless existence: rage, hunger, contempt, the savage joy of destruction. But this sensation was entirely foreign. This tiny being had touched it not with fear or hatred, but with affection so pure and simple that it shattered something fundamental in the worm's understanding of the universe. "There," Emma said cheerfully, stepping back and wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "Now you don't look so grumpy. Do you feel better?" The worm's massive head tilted slightly, studying the child with an expression that observers from 1,000 worlds would later struggle to describe. Ancient intelligence wrestled with concepts it had never needed to consider. Kindness, innocence, love, freely given without expectation of return. Meanwhile, in the shelter below, Sarah Chen had fought her way through the emergency tunnels, following her daughter's path with a mother's desperate determination. Behind her, Dr. Webb and several other colonists emerged into the devastated park, expecting to find the child's remains. Instead, they found Emma having what appeared to be a conversation with the most dangerous entity in known space. "You're really, really big," Emma was saying, looking up at the worm with undisguised admiration. "But that's okay. Sometimes being big makes you feel lonely, doesn't it?" The creature's response was not words, but a low harmonic that resonated through the planet's crust. To the terrified adults watching from behind the ruins of a collapsed building, it sounded like the groaning of a world about to be torn apart. But somehow, Emma seemed to understand its meaning perfectly. "Oh, you are lonely," she said with the matter-of-fact sympathy that only children could manage. "That's very sad. Would you like to be my friend?" "I don't have very many friends here because all the other kids think I'm too little to play with them." Sarah took a step forward, her maternal instincts overriding her terror. "Emma, honey, please come here." But the little girl was entirely focused on her new companion. She had produced her stuffed elephant from somewhere and was holding it up toward the worm's massive head. "This is Mr. Peanuts," she explained seriously. "He's my very best friend, but I think he'd like you too. Do you want to be friends with Mr. Peanuts?" The worm's head descended until it was nearly touching the ground, bringing one enormous eye level with the child. Emma, showing no fear whatsoever, walked right up to the eye. Each iris was larger than her entire body, and patted it gently. "Your eyes are like pretty stars," she said. "Are you from space?" "I'm from space too, but I live here now. Do you want to live here too? We have lots of room." 3 star systems away, Ambassador Zeftari was receiving reports from his sensor operators that defied all logic. The energy readings from Kepler 442b had shifted dramatically. Instead of the rising destruction patterns they had expected, something else was happening, something unprecedented. "Sir," his aide reported, mandibles clicking nervously, "the worm has stopped Stopped what? Stopped everything, sir. The destruction, the energy emissions, even its movement. It's just hovering there. On the planet's surface, Emma had discovered that if she scratched gently at the base of one of the worm's scales, the creature would emit a sound remarkably similar to purring. The ancient destroyer of worlds was actually enjoying being petted by a 3-year-old human. You like that, don't you? Emma giggled. Mr. Peanuts likes being scratched behind his ears, too. Maybe you and Mr. Peanuts are more alike than you look. The watching adults remained frozen in disbelief. Dr. Webb activated his emergency communicator, somehow managing to get a weak signal through the interference still surrounding the worm. This is New Eden Colony, he whispered into the device. We need to report a situation. The threat appears to be neutralized. Neutralized? Came the disbelieving response from the Galactic Council's emergency coordinator. Did you manage to activate some kind of defense system? No. Dr. Webb replied, staring at the impossible scene before him. A child is petting it. The silence that followed stretched so long that Dr. Webb thought the communication had failed. Repeat that last transmission, came the eventual response. A 3-year-old human child approached the creature and is currently treating it like a pet. The worm appears to be responding favorably. Emma had found a comfortable spot next to one of the worm's massive coils and had settled down as if for story time, her stuffed elephant in her lap. The creature had curved its neck around to watch her with obvious fascination. Do you know any songs? Emma asked. I know lots of songs. Want me to sing you one? Without waiting for an answer, she began singing a simple children's lullaby, her clear voice carrying across the devastated landscape. As her song continued, something remarkable happened. The withered plants around the colony began to show signs of new growth. The oppressive weight that had pressed down on every living thing in the worm's presence began to lift. The creature itself seemed to relax for the first time in eons, its massive form settling more comfortably around the tiny singer. The malevolent energy that had surrounded it like a dark aura gradually faded, replaced by something warmer and infinitely more peaceful. By the time Emma finished her song, the shadow worm of Nethys Prime had undergone a transformation that would be debated by xenobiologists and philosophers for generations to come. The creature that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years had become something else entirely. A lonely ancient being that had found, in the innocence of one human child, the first real companionship it had known since the dawn of consciousness. That was beautiful, Emma said, looking up at the worm's massive eye. You were humming along, weren't you? You have a very nice voice. When the rescue ship Harmony finally arrived at Kepler 442b, its crew found the colony not only intact but somehow improved. The worm had used its incredible power not to destroy, but to repair the damage it had initially caused. New growth flourished where its presence had once brought only death. Emma had fallen asleep curled against the creature's neck, with Mr. Peanuts tucked safely in her arms. The worm remained perfectly still, as if afraid to disturb the sleeping child. Captain Rodriguez of the Harmony stared at the scene through his ship's viewports, struggling to find words for his report to Earth Command. How do we even begin to explain this? He asked his first officer. I don't think we do, came the reply. I think we just accept it. The Galactic Council's emergency session reconvened 1 week later, but the tone had changed completely. Instead of discussing evacuation procedures and military responses, the assembled delegates found themselves trying to understand what they had witnessed. The worm has not left the human colony, reported Ambassador Zeftari. It appears to have taken up permanent residence in their system. All hostile activity has ceased completely. And the child? Asked Chancellor Vexthul. Emma Chen has become something of a galactic celebrity. She continues to treat the worm as what she calls her space friend. The creature responds to her with what can only be described as devotion. A 3-year-old human has tamed the most dangerous entity in known space, Chancellor Vexthul said slowly, as if testing the words to see if they made any more sense when spoken aloud. By giving it a kiss and teaching it songs. It would appear so. Chancellor. The assembled delegates sat in stunned silence, each trying to process the implications. The shadow worm, terror of the galaxy, had been neutralized not by advanced weapons or ancient technologies, but by the simple affection of a human child who saw a lonely creature and wanted to help. Ambassador Schlana of the Aquatic Federation finally spoke what everyone was thinking. Perhaps we should be more concerned about what this says about humans than what it says about the worm. On Kepler 442b, Emma Chen was teaching her enormous friend how to play hide-and-seek, a game that required considerable creativity when one participant was several thousand kilometers long. The worm had discovered that it could use local cloud formations to partially conceal itself, much to Emma's delight. "Found you," she called out, pointing at a suspiciously dragon-shaped cloud formation. The worm's gentle rumbling laughter created aurora displays across the sky that had become a regular evening entertainment for the colonists. Sarah Chen watched her daughter play with a creature that could crack moons like eggs, and found herself thinking about the nature of humanity itself. Perhaps this was what made them unique in the galaxy: their ability to see potential friends in the most unlikely places, their willingness to offer kindness without fear or reservation. Emma had shown the universe that sometimes the most powerful force in existence was not a weapon or a technology, but a small child's capacity for unconditional love. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, other ancient entities felt the ripple effects of that simple truth and wondered what it might mean for the future of all life in the cosmos.